Ichabod Crane wanted a secure home, respect, and enough food to satisfy his enormous hunger. Without these things, his future seemed full of blankness. He lived in Sleepy Hollow, a quiet Dutch farming valley, near the Hudson River. It seemed cut off from the fast-changing young nation growing around it. Dreams and old beliefs filled people's minds there. The valley's most famous tale concerned a soldier who had fought in the recent war that had just ended. A cannonball had taken the soldier's head during battle, and people said his body lay in the churchyard. Each night, his ghost searched for its missing head. He was tall and painfully thin, with long legs, narrow shoulders, and a nose like a bird's beak. Everything about him looked stretched. They called the ghost the Headless Horseman. Ichabod's black coat hung from his narrow shoulders like cloth on a wooden frame as he went about his work. Inside the small log schoolhouse, children were repeating words while Ichabod watched from his high stool. He kept order and expected careful lessons. During lessons, Ichabod could be strict with the children. After school, however, he became friendly again, and local families helped him because his pay was small. They gave him meals and beds. In return, he helped farmers with light work, cared for young children, and made himself useful around their homes. He also taught singing. His strong, thin voice carried across the fields, where farmers and their families could hear his high notes from far away. Ichabod loved books about ghosts and magic. One evening, he was reading beside the brook until the page faded into blankness, and then he walked home, through dark woods. Every natural sound seemed to heighten his fear. A bird moved in a bush, and a beetle suddenly struck his coat as he passed beneath the trees. Ichabod immediately imagined evil spirits, so he began singing a religious song. Its high notes followed him along the empty road and through the darkness. At other times, old women welcomed him beside their fires and told stories about ghosts. Their favorite tale always returned to the horseman near the church. Their story led to the bridge near the church, where dark branches covered the road and the deep brook moved below the narrow wooden boards. They claimed the ghost could not cross the bridge before disappearing. Ichabod believed nearly every word of the old women's warning and remembered it clearly. In daylight, Ichabod laughed at his fears, but at night the same tales returned with terrible force. Even familiar roads then seemed filled with hidden danger. Yet ghosts were not the greatest danger before him. A young woman was about to enter his thoughts and change the peaceful life he knew in Sleepy Hollow. Across the valley, people admired Katrina Van Tassel. At 18, she was cheerful, and as Baltus Van Tassel's only child, she would inherit great wealth. Baltus Van Tassel was one of the area's richest farmers. His daughter lived in comfort, but her warm manner, not only her fortune, drew everyone's eyes. Once each week, Ichabod Crane gave Katrina a singing lesson in the schoolhouse, while the brook ran quietly outside and the other students gathered around. Amid the other students, Katrina always caught Ichabod's attention. Her warm smile could heighten his hopes with one glance, and every song seemed meant for him. When Ichabod first visited Katrina's home, he stopped before the prosperous farmhouse. The fields, barn, pond, pens, and orchard seemed to promise an endless harvest. Wide fields of corn and wheat surrounded the house. Orchard branches bent under red apples, while pigs crowded the pens, and ducks crossed the pond. Turkeys walked proudly around the enormous barn. Everywhere Ichabod looked, the land seemed active and full, offering food in every season of the year ahead. Inside, Polished plates shone on the walls. Dried peaches and peppers hung above heavy wooden furniture, and every comfortable room clearly displayed the family's plenty. Ichabod saw more than a beautiful young woman. He imagined pies, roasted birds, soft beds, valuable land, and money. Then began to speculate about Katrina's future wealth.
If I marry Katrina, I will never go hungry again.
He kept the words to himself. His imagination carried him far beyond the farm. He pictured selling the land and moving west with Katrina and several children, while pots swung beneath their wagon.
If I were her husband, I would become an important man.
Baltus was a kind father who allowed Katrina to make her own choices. While he smoked on the porch, Ichabod walked with Katrina near the spring. Katrina's mother remained busy with the house and farm animals. No one knew exactly what Katrina felt as she walked beside the hopeful schoolmaster there. Sometimes Katrina listened closely to Ichabod. Sometimes her bright eyes moved toward another visitor. Her changing attention left both the schoolmaster and the valley uncertain. People began to speculate about Ichabod's chances. Some thought Katrina enjoyed his songs, while others believed that she merely enjoyed being admired by him instead. Ichabod ignored every doubt. Amid all that wealth, he saw no room for failure, and trusted that learning, good manners, and patience would win Katrina's heart. However, another man already hoped to marry her. Unlike Ichabod, this rival was strong, fearless, and famous throughout the countryside, as a bold horseman everywhere. His name was Brom Bones. To Ichabod, that well-known name meant one thing: the easy path toward Katrina Van Tassel had suddenly ended. Brom Bones was broad and powerful, and few riders could match him. He loved races, rough jokes, and noisy adventures with his friends. His favorite horse, Daredevil, was almost as wild as he was. Brom Bones had chosen Katrina Van Tassel long before Ichabod Crane arrived, and everyone understood his purpose. When Brom Bones's horse stood outside the Van Tassel farm, most other young men withdrew. Ichabod Crane did not. He kept returning to see Katrina Van Tassel. Ichabod Crane knew he could never defeat Brom Bones in a fight. Wary of meeting him alone, he visited Katrina Van Tassel as her singing teacher instead.
If Brom Bones catches me challenging him, he will fold me like a sheet.
He kept his distance whenever Brom Bones appeared. Brom Bones showed open disdain for the thin schoolmaster, but he could not frighten Ichabod Crane away. That quiet resistance annoyed him more than any argument would have done. Soon, strange trouble greeted Ichabod Crane at the Sleepy Hollow schoolhouse. Smoke filled the room because someone had blocked the chimney during the night. Benches stood upside down, while books lay amid broken chalk and scattered papers. Ichabod Crane stared at the disorder, certain that no ordinary accident had caused it. The old blankness of fear filled him, and their hidden smiles seemed to heighten it. He began to speculate whether witches had entered during the night, while the children suspected Brom Bones. The children struggled not to laugh. Brom Bones also trained a dog to make a long, ugly noise during singing lessons, calling the animal a better teacher than Ichabod Crane. Katrina Van Tassel laughed, though nobody could tell whom she favored. Ichabod Crane treated Brom Bones's jokes with outward disdain, but inside he remained wary and watchful. He knew Brom Bones wanted a chance to fight, and he refused to provide one. One autumn afternoon, a messenger rode up to the Sleepy Hollow schoolhouse. He carried an invitation to a large evening party at the Van Tassel farm. Ichabod Crane suddenly released the children early, and they rushed outside, shouting with joy. Alone again, He cleaned his only black suit and arranged his thin hair before a broken mirror. Every careful movement seemed to heighten his hopes for the evening. Ichabod Crane had to borrow gunpowder for the party that evening. The horse had a cloudy eye, a bony back, and a bad temper. Ichabod Crane climbed into the saddle and started toward Katrina Van Tassel's home. Behind him, the schoolhouse became quiet again. Ahead waited food, dancing, ghost stories, and Brom Bones. Guests were arriving when Ichabod Crane reached Van Tassel Farm. Wagons filled the yard, horses stood by the fence, and music escaped through open doors. Inside, the long oak table held cakes, apple pies, pumpkin pies, ham, chicken, cream, and preserved fruit. The rich sight could evoke Ichabod Crane's happiest dreams. He ate until he felt almost brave. Across the long table, rich dishes crowded together in warm light, promising more food than Ichabod Crane had ever dreamed of eating. "Help yourself," Baltus cried, slapping Ichabod Crane warmly on the shoulder. As he ate, Ichabod Crane looked around and began to speculate again. If he married Katrina Van Tassel, all this food, rich land, and comfort might become part of his life. Then the dancing began. Katrina Van Tassel chose Ichabod Crane as her partner. His long arms and legs flew in every direction, yet he moved with complete confidence and obvious delight. In a shadowed corner, he sat apart from the dancers, watching each confident step and every smile that passed between the pair. Brom Bones's face showed jealous disdain. Ichabod Crane noticed him and became apprehensive, but Katrina Van Tassel's warm smile soon heightened his courage, and he continued enjoying the celebration. After the dance, older guests gathered on the porch. They were telling stories about the war, strange deaths, and local spirits. Ichabod Crane joined them, though he remained wary of Brom Bones. One tale described a traveler who was forced to ride behind the headless horseman. At the church bridge, the terrible rider became a skeleton and threw the helpless man into the brook. Brom Bones laughed and offered his own story.
"I raced the horseman on Daredevil. I would have beaten him. At the bridge, he vanished in fire."
His words could evoke both fear and wonder. Ichabod Crane answered with stories from his books, while the porch slowly grew darker and the listeners drew closer together. At last, families departed, their laughter and wagon wheels faded down the roads. Ichabod Crane stayed behind to speak privately with Katrina Van Tassel after the other guests had gone. No one heard their conversation. Perhaps he asked for her hand. Perhaps she gently refused him. Perhaps she had only used his attention to make Brom Bones jealous. When Ichabod Crane came out a short time later, his face looked crushed. Behind him, Katrina Van Tassel remained inside the bright house. From a distance, Brom Bones watched with a knowing smile. Ichabod Crane was too hurt to show disdain or anger. He woke Gunpowder, climbed onto the saddle, and turned toward the lonely road. He was apprehensive about riding alone in the darkness, yet he could not remain at Van Tassel Farm. Behind him, the cheerful music weakened, and the welcoming lights disappeared. Ahead, beneath crowded branches and the old white church bridge waded over the deep brook. Ichabod Crane and Gunpowder were riding toward it. Ichabod rode slowly beneath the dark trees. The party's ghost stories returned to him amid the small sounds of the night, and every branch could evoke a reaching hand. Gunpowder responded unreliably to the reins. Sometimes, The old horse stopped without warning. Then he rushed forward so suddenly that he nearly threw Ichabod from the saddle. Ichabod passed a huge tree linked to a dead wartime officer. Its white trunk mark looked like a hanging figure until the woods seemed full of blankness. A branch rubbed against another and made a low groan. Ichabod's teeth shook. Increasingly apprehensive, he forced Gunpowder onward through the threatening woods toward a rough bridge. Fear had taken control of Ichabod, yet he kept riding. In the darkness ahead, Gunpowder stopped once more without warning. Something large waited beside the road. Ichabod stared through the darkness, unable to see its face, and called out to the silent, unmoving figure ahead.
Who are you?
No answer came.
Who are you? Speak.
The figure remained silent. Ichabod began singing a religious song, but the stranger moved onto the road beside him. It was a huge rider on a powerful black horse. The stranger moved beside Ichabod and matched every change in Gunpowder's speed, slowing or hurrying with him. The moon shone unreliably through moving clouds. On rising ground, the stranger appeared clearly against the sky, and Ichabod saw that he had no head upon his shoulders. Instead, he carried a round object on the front of his saddle. Ichabod struck Gunpowder with his heels, and the old horse raced downhill. Gunpowder raced downhill, while the black horse followed close behind. Stones flew beneath their feet, and Ichabod could hear the other rider gaining on him.
If I reach the church bridge, I will be safe.
His saddle came loose and fell. He held Gunpowder's neck and struggled to stay on the bony horse.
If I were brave, I would turn and face him.
But he knew he was not brave enough. Gunpowder thundered onto the wooden church bridge above the deep brook. Ichabod clung to his neck as the black horse closed in behind. Ichabod looked back, expecting the ghost to disappear. Instead, the headless horseman rose in his saddle. Ichabod was wary, but much too late to escape. The rider threw the round object straight at Ichabod. It struck his head with a terrible crash, and he fell heavily from Gunpowder into the road. Gunpowder, the black horse, and the mysterious rider rushed onward into the night. Behind them, Ichabod lay in the road, and the hollow became silent. At dawn, Gunpowder returned alone to his owner's gate. His saddle was missing, and the reins hung loosely beneath his feet as he waited. Ichabod Crane did not appear for breakfast, and no one knew where he was. When school time came, he was still missing, with no message. Beside the brook, the children waited through the quiet morning. The door remained shut, and their teacher never arrived to begin the day's lessons. As the hours passed, worry replaced hope. Several village men gathered near the empty school and began following Gunpowder's tracks toward the church bridge together. Under the dark branches, the searchers followed the tracks to the bridge. The silent church and deep brook made every man wary of what lay ahead. They found the lost saddle in the road. Beyond the bridge lay Ichabod's black hat and a broken pumpkin, but the brook held no body. Villagers began to speculate about the horseman. Their apprehensive voices filled the churchyard the following Sunday, and most decided the ghost had carried Ichabod away. The old women repeated the tale beside their fires. Each telling could evoke a darker rider, heighten the danger, and create a more terrible chase. Brom Bones soon married Katrina Van Tassel. Whenever anyone mentioned the pumpkin, he threw back his head and laughed loudly, as if enjoying a private joke. His amusement suggested disdain for the ghost story and knowledge he would not share. Some people remained wary, believing Brom Bones had dressed as the horseman and chased his rival away. Human memories worked unreliably, however, and no one could prove anything. Years later, a traveler brought surprising news. Ichabod Crane was alive and living elsewhere. He had fled because of fear, shame, and possible anger from Gunpowder's owner. In another part of the country, Ichabod Crane had continued teaching there. He later studied law, entered politics, wrote for newspapers, and became a judge. That life would have remained impossible if he had stayed in Sleepy Hollow. Yet the people of the valley preferred their supernatural ending. Amid their old stories, mystery felt more satisfying than the plain proof that Ichabod Crane survived. The old schoolhouse slowly fell apart. Travelers claimed they heard a thin voice singing near it after dark, while every deep shadow at the bridge seemed to hold the horseman. Was Brom Bones responsible? Or did a ghost truly ride that night? The answer remains in blankness, because human evidence never settled the valley's argument. Sleepy Hollow's legend endured because mystery mattered more than proof. The thought of hollow hoofbeats still evokes this warning. Be wary when a headless rider follows you toward the church bridge. Here are some of the words you met in this story. Say each one to yourself.